Hi, everybody. This is Ontario, the second big city. Riyadh is unfortunately sick today, so it's just going to be me today. Well, me and a special guest, Mr. Dalrymple, the dean of our school.
Hello.
So, Mr. Dalrymple, you are the dean of the high school that Riyadh and I go to.
Yes.
So, the first thing that we wanted to do today is kind of talk about what that's like, being the dean of a school.
I don't know what it's like being dean of any school. I know this school is, there's a lot to do. It's not really a focused job in any way. It can range from trying to, fix something that's broken, or it can be just teaching, right? And so, that's why I got into education, was to teach. And I do that maybe 50% of the time, and then the dean job takes over for just sort of administrative stuff, school records, publishing curriculum, things like that. That's maybe 30% of the job, and then there's like the 20% just random stuff that comes up where I just don't know I don't know what's coming. It might be that the students need to clean their commons better, or it might be that the basketball hoop broke, and so that's what it's like being dean here. It's just a bunch of different hats that you're constantly changing.
Just like the hat you're wearing now.
Like the hat I'm wearing now, just covers everything.
What's the hardest part about being dean?
The hardest part is when kids are mean to other kids. I think it's so tricky. Like those of us who've been in public school, we have this perspective that I think is really helpful in coming to Westwood, and that is it's like we see how powerful a small community can be, but it also has this potential for pressure cooker situations. If kid starts getting mad at another kid, and especially if it gets developed with some friends secretly online, then that's really tricky to deal with. And it's depressing, obviously, because it's destructive to the community, and it's tricky because it doesn't necessarily happen during school hours, and so you're trying to figure out where are the boundaries. How do you approach these sort of situations?
Yeah, that can be a big downside of having such a small school.
For sure, yeah.
Is that everyone's so cliquey sometimes that it's hard to break away from those?
Yeah, when you have a clique, it is, the formation of the clique itself is problematic. If the clique's ethos isn't open and welcome, which they wouldn't have formed a clique. So, and you've seen it. There's some classes where they just, they tend to be a lot more relaxed about those things, and there's other classes where that sort of culture comes in, and it's pretty hard to get rid of in a way where you're also keeping the school intact. Yeah.
So, what is your favorite part about being dean? What's fun about it?
I think my favorite part is surprising students with things they don't expect from school or school administrators. You've been my student for a few years, Ontario, so probably what it's like, but from things like fake elections and drama about being a dictator,
your multiple different personalities.
Yeah, the many different personalities, or doing the Minecraft server, stuff like that, where the students aren't expecting it. It's just a treat for them. It's got no academic weight or anything. I mean, it's definitely my favorite part, is to sort of, and it reminds me, because I was a summer camp counselor for 5 years when I was going through college and just after college, and it reminds me of that, of you're always trying to come up with new things to do that'll get everybody excited, and it's hilarious to catch the students off balance a little bit, but then they just jump in and they're in the game with you. So it's pretty fun.
So in a little bit, we're going to talk about these whole different personalities, the econ class, because I think that is essential to Westwood.
Okay, yeah. Well, the different personalities are essential to Westwood.
Yes, your split personality disorder is
yes.
Definitely.
Yes. Okay.
I think it's essential to your.
It's not a disorder.
No. So you teach several different classes. I've taken English, world government, econ, and philosophy from you.
Yeah.
What is your favorite class to teach?
The last couple of years it's been economics. It's because that has been such a successful simulation. I can gamify that class so much, and I can make it so whatever you're imagining, student, if you want to do it, you can probably do it in economics, and then we can find a way to give you points for it and figure out what how you're thinking. Because the goal of that class, I think I told y'all at the start, I hope I did, is to think like an economist. And everybody has that ability. It's just sort of recognizing when you're doing that. And since I don't have to follow the IB curriculum or the AP curriculum, I get to it's just like a playground, and y'all get the economics required half credit, and I can hopefully give y'all meaningful experiences with it.
Can we kind of explain what the WA system is? Because there's definitely some listeners who are a little confused.
Sure, yeah. So the WA system, the WA is the name of the currency that we use at Westwood. It's
one of them.
It's the currency that I started. Yes, there's a competing currency or two out there, but shortly, soon to be nationalized. But the WA is a Greek letter that kind of, I guess it existed like maybe back in Homeric times. It was called the digamma, and I guess there was a shorthand called WA, and it's just because you have this nice W sound, you're trying to put a symbol with it. So I found that to be a nice connect. And you spell it W-A-W, anglicized, and so I found that to be a nice Westwood, right, currency. It started up as we started up when cryptocurrency was going crazy, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, Westwood will make a cryptocurrency purely as a joke. But once I started getting into it, I realized this is we can actually learn a lot about what's going on in the cryptocurrency market. And so that very first effort of bringing it in, there was a lot of students who were interested in cryptocurrency. Everyone was interested in cryptocurrency, and so I was like, well, hey, we can show you how this works. On a level where you're not investing and possibly losing, your life
thousands
savings.
of dollars.
Right. So, but yeah, it's eventually evolved into, I guess you could call it a fiat currency, given the simulation. Okay. The fiat of Westwood, the government, is. That's part of the simulation there.
So in the WA economy, there was also our little world government class, the experiment that was Detroit.
Yes.
I don't know how exactly to explain Detroit. I know my experience with that class was rather different than most people's.
That class, should I just start talking?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just going to say that class, y'all knew this from the get-go, is that it was an experiment to see if we could run sort of a government class as a simulation the way we were doing the economics class the year before. So all of you who had signed up for that class were, you knew what, early on what we were trying to do, and you knew what it was like. That, I feel like, was a learning experience where there wasn't a lot of success. We had these moments of big fun, but
rating milks,
electing God. The Detroit Manual of Style was one of the funniest things that y'all did, but this was something where I don't know how much. Like, it's sort of like when you're doing, what I started to realize is like when you're doing economic simulation, there's like, it's not that hard to find something going on in the real world where you're like, oh, okay, you're interested in this scarcity of resource or whatever. Okay, we can take that general idea and apply it to the world. Whereas I was having a lot more trouble with that in the government class when y'all were electing God, and I was like, okay, what government, like what real world government can I connect this to? And yeah, we talked about sort of like certain dictatorships or absolutist governments, but it always felt like a lot more of a stretch because I don't know, the Detroit form of government was so specific and seemed to be so, maybe it was too in on the joke a little bit. And so the value that I thought we could pull from those sort of like simulations of elections and legislation was pretty limited. Now I think y'all have some nice experiential memories of what it's like to be in Parliament and to a prime minister's questions and all that. But yeah, I think I felt like as far as like the amount that I delivered to y'all, it's tough to say. Y'all are gonna have to tell me in years later whether or not that class made any sort of meaningful political impact.
That class was tough for me just because I felt like I wasn't learning anything when I was in there because it was so like joke heavy.
Yeah.
But I can say that I do know that in the Parliament the tables are 2 swords lengths apart from each other.
Right.
So I have learned something from that class.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was joke heavy, and that was that mixture of students where they just wanted to run up the joke as much as possible. So, yeah, and I mean, I think it was, thank God, only 1 semester class. I didn't set it up for a whole year. But the other side of that was like I sort of got into a mode of like, oh, I just gotta, entertain this for a little bit longer. And so, yeah, there was a few times where I felt like, I think we had some discussions and I was like, I need to just like jam in some interesting stuff here, whether or not it connects. And we did that, and I think maybe salvaged a little bit of the class from the standpoint of traditional content delivery. But yeah, it was a learning experience, which is to say, the students maybe didn't learn, but I learned a lot about what you can simulate and what you can't. So now I'm actually doing the civics class, which is the U.S. government class, mainly with the sophomores, and I'm playing with some ideas that we got from Detroit, but everything's managed through the economics first, so that economic system, which is I think a class that I've developed a lot better, and I have a lot more stability in there. I can always fall back to that and sort of like get some sort of grounding before we try to make a joke. And I think part of it, Ontario, is just like students take money more seriously, even fake money, and they don't take really government seriously unless it's connected to money.
Right.
And I think like I get that, because when I was a teenager, like what the government was doing was less important to me, whether or not I could buy a Nintendo game.
Right.
And so I think there was something, I think there might be something to that, of having that sort of as the basis for the class.
And that might have been why I was a little bit less successful in that class, is that I care very much about government and politics. And so I was expecting something that was more like heavy or like focused, and I got this simulation game that was very fun at points, but was also not at all what I was expecting.
Right. And and honestly, when I thought about the class, I originally thought of it as like a heavy focus class, and I was thinking about certain students who would really enjoy it, but that's not who showed up. That's not who showed up. I still wanted a simulation, but I thought we'd be able to be like really like in it, in the weeds on this stuff. And it sounds bad, son showed up, but yeah, it's like, it's rare, right? It's rare, and like, remind the listeners, I was not a student who was interested in government or politics. I definitely would have been the kind who would have been like, oh, this class can be like, we're just seeing how thick we can lay it on. I'm in. That would have been me. And so those rare students who are like really interested in the nitty gritty of this stuff, I think I felt like were definitely not served as well. So that was, that was regretful, but once again, I think I salvaged our relationship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you might have been the only one in there who cared. So that's okay.
So what are the many different personalities of Sean Dalrymple?
So I think last year I had it at 3 personalities. There was Mr. Dalrymple, the teacher, who was the one running the class. Then there was CEO Dalrymple, who was running the bank, the West Wealth Bank, where the WA transactions are managed, and generally, a lot of wealth is created there. I shouldn't say a lot, but like the wealth of the student body is managed there. Most of it, sorry, to other banks who might be listening. And then there's the absolutist, who effectively exists because some things can't happen at the school, and so you try to. This is a tricky thing. Another tricky thing about running a school is that you want to give the students like a say, but unless you have a real democratic school, which they're out there, and I really admire the people who start these things up and like just hand over the reins to students, but like that's not the expectation of anybody who's coming to Westwood. So I have to sort of exist as like the absolutist, which is to say, sometimes when the students do something or they start taking the power and going somewhere with it, the absolutist has to step in and be like, no, that can't actually happen. I never intended to create that persona. It's more that I shut a few things down, and a certain someone we know decided to just say, oh, I guess the absolutist says that's a no-go, and I was like, that's right. And now that certain someone is trying to get me to sign basically a constitution where I lose some of my power as the absolutist. So I really appreciate the efforts there, but yeah, the absolutist was never like, I'll be the absolutist too. It was because a student named me that when I was trying to manage sort of the organic student response to some power that they got.
Yeah.
And so.
This certain someone is a good friend of mine and has really done a number to the economics class before.
Yeah, he did some really fun things there. He tried to start his own country, or I guess he did. It's separate from Westwood, so had his own bank. Certainly had a lot of ideas. Almost bankrupt the West Wealth Bank, but yeah, pretty clever. Totally engaged student, the kind that gets a lot from whatever enriching opportunities in front of them.
So the last class that you teach is philosophy.
Yes.
And that's a class that I'm currently taking from now, and that Riyadh is also taking from me right now.
Yeah.
So what is it like being a philosophy teacher?
Philosophy teacher is a pretty interesting one for me. I think it's so first of all, philosophy is the reason I came back to teaching. So I left teaching after teaching at a public school for 6 years, and I'd had some philosophy in college, but I started to get into philosophy when I was running my own business, and I was like I was just like working with your hands, woodworking, right? And so I had a lot of time to hear things, and so I was doing these audio books, and then I got into this just kind of run on philosophy, and I started to think about things in terms of like, you know, my my obligations, my to the rest of society, and like the ethics of things that are basically essential to a society. And not to say that woodworking isn't essential to society, it certainly is, but I started to feel like I'd stepped away from something that I needed to be doing. And but I also was like so disenchanted with public school when I left, because and just want to say this, it's my thing I always say it's not the students, right? It's sort of the students just from the standpoint of amount, right? Mm-hmm. Like I would daily, interact with more students in English class than I would interact with here in the whole school, right? It's mm-hmm. like, it's just way too much of a demand on a person's time. It's just impossible. I mean, you just have to cut corners all mm-hmm. over the place. But and so I was thinking really critically about how to approach going back into education, and that's how I found Westwood. And I actually applied all over. So philosophy is sort of this thing where I feel like it, and Westwood's been absolutely the best thing. It's been the right choice for me. And so philosophy, when I think about philosophy, I know you asked about teaching philosophy class, but I just want to say when I think about philosophy and I think about my experience with it, it's... Are we ready?
Yeah, I'm recording.
All right, so I remember where I stopped off, but that is a good example of what's it like to be dean. It's mm-hmm. I can schedule time, I can plan for something, and it just doesn't matter because something more important comes up.
Absolutely.
And more pressing, not more important, mm-hmm. I should say. And so the less pressing things get pushed back, as this does, and then we run out of time. But where I left off, I was saying when I think about philosophy, and it's literally one of the most important ways that I've thought about the world, and it's massively impacted my approach mm-hmm. To my life, and so it's super important. So when I teach philosophy, which is to finally get to your question, it's weighty. It's you might think, oh, it's going to be so fun to teach philosophy if it's so important to you, but it's it's really hard for me to not just feel this immense pressure to mm-hmm. do it really well, and at first, I would approach it by just let's just trust the text, just trust the text mm-hmm. of the philosophers. And I did that for, 5 or 6 years of that. And then, the dean thing happened and I started running out of time, and I tried to start to package it up a little differently. But now I'm trying to get back to the text mm-hmm. because I think when you feel something so weighty about, how it affects you, the only thing you can do is to provide the same thing that you went through. I think, well, it's not the only thing you can do, but the thing that makes sense for me to do is to provide the experience that I had, and hope that that something in that reaches the students.
Right.
I'm obviously going to be, I'm trying different things now with mm-hmm. philosophy in terms of assignments. But in terms of actually teaching it, I think I need to get back to just get to the text, mm-hmm. be it an audiobook or the actual what we're doing in class, sit with the text, and have it affect your mind. So it's really it's a different mode. I'm really glad this year that I have philosophy on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, mm-hmm. and economics Tuesday, Thursday, so that I can just shift gears overnight.
Right.
But yeah, teaching philosophy is weighty. It feels like I have to do it right. I psych myself out all the time and mess up because I put so much pressure on myself to do it well. And it's one of those things that I haven't quite zeroed in on like the right balance between like just trust the text and give the students like interesting things to do. But I think I'm getting there.
I think for a person who puts a lot of pressure on yourself, you're doing a very good job.
Thanks. I'm supposed to be covering a class right now, so I don't know how those kids feel. But by the way, when I stepped away, one of the things, like we had to deal with a couple of things, but one of the things that came up is like, oh, we don't have someone to sub this class. And so I was like, oh, all right. And so I just stepped in real quick, made sure they had work to do. I was like, I'm going back to the interview, and I had another person keeping an eye, down the hall on it.
Okay. I'm glad to know that we take a little bit of priority.
A little bit. I probably need to step out like every couple minutes here to be smart for me to just check in on them. But yeah, they're students who can manage their assignment, so I'm not too worried about it.
So would you consider yourself a philosopher?
Yes, from the really Platonic, view of, love of wisdom. I think I don't really know. I don't know that I have any wisdom, but I feel like when I've had these moments where I've interacted with like truly wise decisions, it's clarifying. It just sort of is one of those things that it enlightens the mind to encounter that, and so I think you have to call yourself a philosopher if those kinds of experiences are
right
important.
Well, my dream is to be a philosopher, so one day I will be just like you, Mr. Dalrymple.
You'll do better than I. I think you're already a philosopher. I would expect that you already are, at least. So I think you can call yourself that. I don't think you have to write a great treatise, even though I've tried a few, to be a philosopher. I really think I go to the Socratic example when it comes to that. It's like, are you willing to discuss weighty things and have your mind changed, or your mind explore what's going on in your mind? Then you're a philosopher, and you want that.
Yeah.
You want to understand that. Then I think from the Socratic standpoint, you're a philosopher. You don't want to rest in a bias. You don't want to act like you figured it all out. You want to just constantly explore and understand what it's like to be struggling with wisdom as a human being. I think you're a philosopher.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, you too, Riyadh.
So we have some viewer-submitted questions to kind of wrap up our episode here.
Okay.
So we have 3 different viewer-submitted questions. So the first one is, how was your day?
How's my day?
How's your day?
So far.
That's how it's... How's your day so far?
Absolutely busy. I feel pretty optimistic about it. We're going on our trip next week, the week-long field trip, and I'm going with the middle schoolers. Pretty excited to get to know them. But yeah, it's busy with a hint of optimism.
With a hint of okay.
Yeah.
Okay, our second question, again, a silly question. If you were a superhero, what would your superpower be?
Oh, God. I've had so much time to think about this, and I've been so bad about coming up with it. I think I should walk through walls. I think that would be appropriate for my persona.
I'm sorry, I'm imagining the absolutist just walking in a class now.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. To match the persona, it would be appropriate for students to not expect me and for me to just be there.
Be there, yeah. Always watching.
Yeah, I don't want the creepy thing.
And your big brother of you.
Yeah, but I do want the big brother thing.
Okay.
Right? So I want big brother without the creepiness.
Okay.
So, let's run with that.
Okay, walking through walls. Okay. Okay.
Or teleportation. Maybe that would just be a little cleaner. Or maybe this. Wait, what about I can teleport students to my presence? And like you might be in a conversation with someone, and all of a sudden you're sitting in front of me, and yeah. What about that?
That would be terrifying. Like, I'm having a conversation with my mother, and then all of a sudden I'm here.
Oh yeah, that's a little messed up. Yeah, I didn't mean to take away from your mother. I was more thinking about like only applicable while you're at school.
Oh, okay, got it.
Not in bathrooms, right? There'd be limits to my power. Mm-hmm. Certain areas, safe zones you could.
Safe zones, got it.
It would turn the bathrooms into a gossip stations. It's like, oh, Dalrymple can't transport us out of here. It's the worst idea ever.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
You wanted to get rid of the creepy factor. I don't think you accomplished that at all.
I compounded it. 10x. Yeah, I think I'll say, for the record, I'm not looking for any superpower. I am trying to mess with students. It's maximum messing with students goal is my answer there.
Okay, so our last question is a real question. It is and it's related to philosophy. Why is it okay to be immoral in video games, but not like in real life?
I'm not sure it is okay to be immoral in video games. I struggle a bit with this. I am immoral in video games. Those certainly with those bokoblins or moblins. The monsters that Link has to vanquish. Those things aren't going to kill themselves, right? so I mean, I have a ways to go before any sort of like ethical feeling I have towards them. But I've brought this up, but I do think those villagers in Minecraft, I think there's something really disturbing about. People make like villager farms. They force villagers to be zombies and then heal them so they can get better trade. There's this stuff where it's like, okay, these are like how you exploit and this is my problem with it. It's not that I think that the villagers are sentient, but I think how you exploit something that is ignorant is something you have to be like pretty careful about. Because I do think that our habits that we develop in games potentially can translate into how we treat people. And that's not to say, like, I don't think there's like a one-to-one, like a first-person shooter person wants to go shoot people. But I do think that if you're playing so there's like this pretty famous mission. I never played it, but I heard all about it back when it happened. It was in like, I think, Call of Duty. But it was like, you're a good guy, right? And you've like infiltrated, I don't know, some Russian organization, and the thing you have to do to like keep your cover, right, is like you're gonna have to like help them take over this like terminal at an airport or something.
Okay.
And it's just it was like it made a lot of news because it's just like people just like not like wiping out all of these innocent people, right, in order to like accomplish the mission so that you can remain a deep cover good guy, right? So it's like really like fraught, like ethical, right? And I think like to me, and I'm like, you make those games and you think about like the experience of doing it with some reflection, I think is possibly worthwhile. But the issue is that without the reflection, I think you can just you can start to undervalue your actions just because they're virtual, and not put significance on them just because they're virtual. And so I think it's a lot safer to have an unreflecting fight with a monster, right? That's like clearly out to kill you, than it is to have an unreflecting encounter with innocence, quote unquote innocence NPCs, if you're not going to reflect on it.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to sit there, in fairness to the people who made that mission, it seems like they set it up so that it would be like a difficult mission for a person to do. But it became a thing where people just went over the top with it,
right?
And and it becomes like, well, how far can we push? How much can we show, anybody who's asking us to reflect how little we care about reflecting?
Yeah, I know for me, I go into villages in Minecraft and just kill all the villagers.
You do?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I do, or at least that's what I did when I was a kid.
Well, I mean, and like I think part of this is informed by how I was raised with video games, right? Like being like when you're my age, you were sort of raised as video games developed, and so your encounters with these, my early encounters with like video game characters were like bugs, right? That needed to be squished,
right?
Or shot, or just like these, things that didn't have anything that made you think at all, like twice about like, but and this it could be age too, because I've also started to like stop killing bugs as much too. So yeah, I don't know. It's so hard, but yeah, I think it matters. I think you can play video games however you want, pretty safely. But I do think that you are a more responsible gamer if you reflect on what you're doing and you don't just try to make it a joke. It's sort of like how you engage with anything with friends. It's like you can engage, or by yourself, right? You can engage in anything with sincerity and be like, I don't know, it sounds sincerity in video games, but like thinking about it, I guess, thoughtfully, and recognize that like there's not easy answers out there. There's not like a definite way to be. And yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking because I'm just gonna ruin everybody's video game experience when they get on to their server.
Yeah, next time you play Fortnite, you have to reflect on everyone you killed.
Yeah. Yes. Well, oh my God, I played that one. Do I have time to say this?
Yeah.
I played that one session. I played Fortnite exactly one time with. It was like multiple, I guess, whatever games. But it was one session because some students asked me to get on there, and you get in it, and I'm like, and I still think like it's like I've been through plenty of like things that stick with me in real life, right? So I don't want y'all to think that like video game like memories haunt me, right? But when I do think about like impactful video game moments, one of them was. And I was on the Nintendo Switch, and I didn't have a headset, so I couldn't talk. Right. But I could hear the students who were on there, and they were like, at first, they made me feel like really good about like, because I was new, right? I've certainly played first-person shooters, so it wasn't like brand new, but certainly the controls were I wasn't used to them, and so I would get in trouble, and they'd be like, "He's the priority," and they'd run over, and there's all these other people on there, right, in this game, and that aren't Westwood's people, and they're they're doing the thing where they're winning and all this, and And I start to figure out the game, and by like the third or fourth game, they're like, we need to have it so that you win, that you have the last. And like, I'm not even sure I like managed to like kill anybody.
Right.
And but they've like set up everything. The kids obviously have played a lot more, and they like set everything up so that like it was down to me and this other guy, and then it was just sort of like they were hoping that I would, do the job. And like, and remember, I can't talk, and so I'm not interacting. I'm not feeding back to them how I want things to feel as a player, which I just. And so we get to this point, and they're like, shoot him, and I just hear like these familiar voices tell me to shoot some other guy that's like, yeah, he's like, I mean, I definitely felt like it was more significant than encountering an NPC.
Right.
But he was also shooting at me, right? And so like when I think about that, I'm like, and people ask me about Fortnite, or even mention it, that moment comes to my mind of like students telling me to shoot somebody and me being like, okay, and I do it, and I win the game, and everyone cheers, and everyone talks about it the next day, and I'm like, all right, I feel like that was a little too much.
Too much for you?
Yeah, that was a little too much for me. So yeah, I think like I grapple with video games at a level that maybe some other people don't, but I think I would advise anyone to just be like reflective, just because you can get lost in these games too. That's the other side of it. But that's another story.
Well, thanks everybody for listening to this week's podcast episode. We had Mr. Dalrymple on as our special guest. He is the dean of our high school. Waddy and I are going to take a short hiatus. We're going to New York City, so we should be back in 2 to 3 weeks.
Sorry for talking so much.
No, you're good.